Right, so greetings. Welcome. Hello. Welcome to the Philosophy Club. And here we are. It's May, and we've had a beautiful week here. It was my birthday as well, so that was jolly nice. And we've had good sunshine. But of course today it's gone cloudy and it's raining. But that's good. Get the plants watered, and you know, everyone. Life is about balance between the different elements and the different forces, and the thing is to hold them in balance so that life flourishes. So that's good. Okay, today, according to my records, is Sunday the 12th of May. My birthday was on the 8th, which is the European Peace Day. We have a festival here in France and in most parts of Europe. And then it was the Ascension Day. So I'll just say a few words before we go on with our ritual. So this week I've attended a Daffin family Zoom call for my family on my birthday, which was fun with my daughters, my sister and so on. And thank you very much for coming. It was great fun. And also we had a meeting of the World Peace Gardens Network, which I chair, on the Monday. The idea is to get gardens around the world linked. It was an idea of my friend, the late Geoffrey Gale, who sadly died, but so I'm keeping that going with friends. Some interesting people scattered in different parts of the world. The garden is sacred to all the religions and all the faiths. We need to get people gardening instead of bombing each other, and that's very important. We also had Ascension Day, which is a great Christian festival, on the Thursday the 9th of May. Again, a feast day here in France. This commemorates the ascension of Christ into heaven. It's a mysterious festival. It's celebrated in most Christian countries in the world. I don't think they all give it a feast day, but like a day off, a holiday. But and of course, in the Eastern churches, it's not happened yet because of the time split between Catholic and Orthodox churches, which I'll be talking about. And I've been working on that, in fact, this week, looking at the theology behind this split. I talked about that last week, and of course I regard it as an unfortunate accident of language and stubborn interpretations, semantics. I think the problem we have with war and conflict and is people get stuck into their ways of looking at things, which are oppositional to each other, and then you get that manifests politically as entrenched sides, or militarily as trench warfare, literally. We're seeing that in Ukraine, we saw it in World War One. I've been to the trenches in the Alps where the Italians and the Austro-Hungarian armies built trenches up in the mountains, and there was, again, mass slaughter like on the Western Front. And that sort of ability of humans to build trenches over virtually anything. You're wearing the wrong colour tie, no, I prefer this colour, etc. I've seen this so often in family quarrels and in faction conflicts and so on. It's an unfortunate byproduct of language, I think, which thinks, as Heraclitus said, in opposites, and Hegel pointed out, everything has its own dialectical opposite. The Jains pointed this out, that's why you can't actually affirm, ultimately, philosophical truths, because the opposite can also be argued for, said the Jains. And said Pyrrho of Elis, the founder of skepticism here in the West, who was instructed, I think, by the Jains and possibly Buddhists. So what do you end up with then? You can't say anything? No, I think what you end up with is surrender to the Holy Spirit, to use Christian language, or to Islamic language, surrender to the beloved, which brings with it a fluidity. Because the whole point of the St. Paul's understanding, theologically, of the Holy Spirit is that it breaks down those old trench warfare things. It breaks down the split between Jewish, Christian, pagan, black, white, male-female. It brings a certain liberty into the equation, which liberates us, in fact, from that need for trench warfare. I once went to a museum in Kobarid, which is a town in the middle of those trenches in the Slavonic. Well, it's in Slovenia, and it's right on the border where the battles took place. There's a museum, if you ever get a chance to go to Kobarid, it's well worth going to, which commemorates those tragic battles. And interestingly, I learned that's where Mussolini first fought. It's where Rommel fought. The Germans and the Italians are fighting there, practice run for later battles. And in the museum, I saw a photograph of a Catholic priest blessing a Hungarian armed force before it was going into battle. It was Austro-Hungarian armies versus Italians. And so all the Hungarians are kneeling down, about to take Mass, and he's holding up the wafer at the holy moment of the celebration of the Mass. And then he's about to give it to them, and then they're about to go into battle. And they're going to be killing Catholics from Italy, who are no doubt receiving the sacraments at the same time by their priests. And I just thought that photograph, I have a postcard of it in my room here in Melpomene. I thought that sums up the stupidity of war. How can you invoke the holy and then set off to go and kill people that you ostensibly of the same religion? So I think that's the failure of human beings to appreciate the power of the Spirit. The failure of allowing the Spirit to remove those frontiers and borders and boundaries and so on. I think it's the failure of philosophers to really understand that, what I'm saying. I mean, Hegel tried, but his prose is so difficult to read that very few people actually really can penetrate what he was saying. And I'm not sure even he knew. but what he was saying was it had the right heart in the right place. That the Spirit is the driving force of history and also in our personal lives. But I don't think he explained or understood the psychological implications of that. And I think, fast forward a couple of 100 years, we've now got to look at this very, very seriously. Not least because of what's going on in Ukraine, when two largely Christian nations who give lip service to the Holy Spirit and the Trinity are killing each other. And there's no end in sight. It's like this entrenched warfare going on. I also did something interesting this week. I watched a brilliant film series that was made by, I think, the BBC a few years ago, with a chap called Ewan McGregor, a Scottish actor, and Charlie Boorman, the son of John Boorman, the Irish film director, who go on a motor bicycle trek across the whole of Europe and all the way around the world. It's called The Long Way Round. I recommend it. And you can get it as a DVD, or I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere. It's absolutely brilliant. These two young lads and set off from Chiswick in London on these two BMW big bikes with all the kit and everything. And then they motorcycle all the way across Europe. And last night I watched as they get across the Ukraine. And then they come to the Russian border. Now this was filmed in the mid-2000s, before all the trouble kicked off. You couldn't make that trip now. It's through a battle zone. But they gaily go through Ukraine. They see the kind of certain level of poverty in the peasants. They're still using, hand hoes to make the fields and donkey carts and all this kind of thing. As they go further east, they notice that it's like going back in time, into medieval times. And then they cross the border into Russia. And anyway, it's very, very interesting to watch this. And of course, it's a bit of history that God knows when the next motorcycle crew will be able to do this journey. Because they then go on, I haven't got there yet, but they go on through Kazakhstan, and they're going to go all the way across Siberia through Russia, down to the Kamchatka Peninsula and across to Alaska. Then they're coming through all the way down Alaska, through Canada, and across the US to New York, which is the final destination. A brilliant piece of filmmaking, and they have a cameraman who's following them on another motorcycle. filming, and so well done to them. Back in the day, I actually knew some of the people that feature in the film. Actually, it reminds me of my West London days, back in Chiswick and Fulham and all that. And so it's like a blast from the past. But what I was thinking is that's the good bit of globalization, is that we can travel to each other's countries and celebrate. And I've learned about a Frenchman who's done a similar thing, called Thyssen, who's also done similar road trips and written books about them. We need more of that, so that we break through these barriers and boundaries instead of fighting and staying behind locked, entrenched lines. So this week, the other thing I want to report is I've made a big decision, actually, because I've been talking about this tragic war in Ukraine and Russia for a very long time, and what can I do? And I finally decided I have to offer a mediation through my mediation service. So I wrote to the chap in charge of the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is the federation of states that replaced the USSR. It includes Russia, but it includes Kazakhstan and all the others, former republics in the... and they've got this loose affiliation, a bit like the British Commonwealth. And they have a parliament, and anyway, I wrote to them saying, would they support my bid for mediation? Because if I got a letter from them saying, yes, we endorse this, that would stand me in good stead when I then approach the Russian government and the Ukrainian government to get Zelensky and Putin to send emissaries. So I've made clear, and I also wrote to the Secretary General of the UN this week, same letter, different, introduction, asking him also to endorse it. Now, the point I'm making here is that the mediation service I run specifically deals with the religious conflict. So I'm saying I'll only deal with that aspect of this conflict. I won't be looking at the military and the political aspects. I'll leave that to others. But I'm figuring that if we can deal with the religious and the philosophical side of it, which means looking at the difference between Orthodox and Western churches, the Catholic position, there's a huge split going on even within the Orthodox Church, because the Russian Orthodox Church, which have sanctioned the war of Putin under its patriarch, are at variance with the mainstream Orthodox communities, which don't agree with it. And Patriarch Bartholomew certainly doesn't. He's the leader of the Orthodox Communion. And the Orthodox churches in Ukraine don't agree with it. So there's a split even within these. Now this is what we would tackle in the mediation. And I've proposed we hold it in Rome, because that's a symbolic centre for Christian spirituality in the whole of Europe. It's a very ancient city. I know it well. I've been to the Vatican. I've sat in the Hall of Cardinals in the Vatican. We can borrow a room off the Pope, or we need 2 rooms to actually host the mediation. And I'm sure that Pope Francis would approve, because he's desperately said, I want to end this war. Here's a practical thing. And in fact, the idea for my mediation service was as a result of going to a conference in the Vatican with Pope John Paul II. So it's sort of, I'm giving back. I think that all Christians all over the world, and all other religions, but let's just say Christians, should be doing our very, very best to end this conflict. And I will, I'll report back on whether I get a reply, whether anyone's interested, and just pray for the success of this, because we've got to do something here. It's ridiculous. I've discovered, by the way, how much it's costing both Russia and Ukraine. They're paying 120 million euros a day, each country, for the war. And it's cost so far something like, I think, hundreds of billions of euros this war's cost since February 22. It's ridiculous. It's bad for their economies. It's bad for their people. And what was so interesting watching Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor cross this country in bicycles, and they film, where they stay at night, and they have a party in Ukraine. Some guy impromptu invites them back to their house. They're meeting local people, which is why it's so interesting. And they're just normal people living normal lives, just like us. And the same in Russia. And so it really hurts me that they're all the same people, actually. And I thought of another idea, by the way, which I'm going to propose in the mediation. If we can get the religious leaders to agree, there's no theological reason for this war, we agree, we sign here, peace. We're going to go back to our respective capitals and insist the political elites sign as well. Okay, who's going to pay for the rebuilding? Well, it should be the arms companies that have fueled this war, because the arms companies have made vast profits with their missiles, both from the West and from the East. Weapons have come from Iran, from Russia has a vast arsenal. So, the final bill to rebuild all these shattered cities in Ukraine and to some extent in Russia is going to be astronomical. Well, that's got to come from the arms companies. They've made vast profits from this war, so let them pay for the rebuild. Now, I don't think that's ever been done before. But to me, it's logical. I would say the same with the Gaza war. Who's responsible for that horrible situation? It's the arms companies, mostly the Americans, giving arms, some British, some German and others, to the Israelis to then drop on, the innocent victims in Gaza who are caught with no way out. And I think those arms companies should pay for the rebuilding. Now, how do we do that legally? Well, we do it. We pass laws in the parliaments. We get politicians that can tell the truth to accept that. We get the UN to pass recommendations and laws and so on and so on. But it's obvious to me that those are the crooks who are behind the scenes profiting from these wars. And therefore they should be the ones to pay for the cleanup bill. I think if that was done, there'd be probably fewer wars on the planet. So anyway, that's what I'm working on at the moment. That's that's applying my spiritual interfaith knowledge, philosophy of the periodic table and all that, to real life war and peacemaking situations. The other thing I've been working on very hard this week is my 99 Names of Peace project, which is each of the 99 names has names of peace in all different languages. And then I talk about the language or go into the history of it. This week I've done Phoenician, which is absolutely fascinating. I've always loved Phoenician. It was the language that gave us the alphabet. The Phoenicians were in the Lebanese coast. They were a Semitic people, West Semitic language, very close to Hebrew and Aramaic, the language of Jesus. And so I've gone into all the details of what was Phoenician, how do we know, where are the inscriptions, who's deciphered it, and all that stuff. And discovered some interesting things. I didn't know this, but our dear friend from North Africa, Saint Augustine, the great theologian of Catholicism, was brought up in a community that spoke Punic, which was the Carthaginian version of Phoenician, because the colonists on the coast of Carthage, planted colonies, and his parents would have brought him up speaking Phoenician. That was his mother tongue. Now that's really interesting in my opinion, because he thinks like a Phoenician, does old Augustine. And of course, so there are huge theological implications of that discovery of mine, which I'm still digesting. And he also then was taught Latin at school by the grammaticus who taught him, so he learned to speak Latin. But that was like the posh language. His mother tongue was Phoenician or Punic. So that's very interesting. And we have the first Phoenician tablet that's been identified in Carpentras, down in the south of France near Avignon here. I've discovered there's a list of all the inscriptions in Phoenician that have ever been made. Some scholars have done a whole compendium of them all. So it's really interesting because it shows a huge light on the biblical saga. But the Phoenician story is slightly different to the biblical story, because as far as they're concerned, the Hebrew tribes stole their idea for the alphabet and then created a kind of a narrative of exclusivism. We're the best, we're the only, we're the true, we're the were the real children of God. The Phoenicians were much more laid back and more open to philosophical currents, and they were traders throughout the whole Mediterranean. They mixed and mingled with Greeks. They even had love affairs. Pythagoras was the fruit of a love affair between a Phoenician and a Greek woman. So was Thales. And they were more philosophically minded, and we know, sadly, not very much about their cosmology because few texts have come down written by Phoenicians. In Carthage, the entire library was destroyed, apparently, which is an utter disgrace. I'm against killing, people, but I'm also against destroying libraries. Talking of which, I've also discovered another shocking thing this week about library destruction. Reading my book on the amazing Renaissance period of Florence and the discovery of these, manuscripts and the whole excitement of the humanist scholarship in Florence, rediscovering the classics and then handwriting them, and then eventually book printing came with Gutenberg. But I'm a great fan of the south of Italy. I've been to Naples. I love the museum in Naples. I've been in the library at the University of Naples where Vico was, and it's where Thomas Aquinas studied. And I've, sat there and mused on all that. And I was amazed at Naples, really, and it was the cradle of the whole kingdom of Sicily and Naples. There was a kingdom there which included the whole of that part of southern Italy and Sicily for hundreds of years. Very sophisticated, very cultured. And Vico, great philosopher, was a product of that. He was professor at the University of Naples. So I went and paid homage to them all. I was reading last night in my book on the Florence work that the amazing bookseller of Florence, Vespasiano, who's the subject of this book, was in correspondence with the king of Naples in his court because he was always buying manuscripts from him. He was ordering a copy of Cicero or Varro or some classic or sometimes Christian texts. And Vespasiano was known throughout Italy as the guy that could get the manuscript made. He knew where to get the originals, he knew the best copyists, how to make the parchment, and you could order. The king of Naples was always ordering books from him, and so ironically he was making books for all the rival clans of Italy that were fighting, because the throne of Naples was a matter of conflict between the Angevins, the French claim. The Count of Anjou had a claim to be the king of Naples, but so did the Spanish. And in fact, they were in charge. The Spanish had claimed it through Aragon. And this chap was making manuscripts for all sides of the battle and was on good friends and good terms with them all. And they all loved learning. This is the paradox. Anyway, so just in a little aside, I read the following, that the court archives of the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily over many hundreds of years included like thousands of documents, letters, priceless letters, correspondence between the kings of Naples and Sicily to all the other crowned heads, plus all their prime ministers and court officials, and private correspondence, also the deeds, the acts they passed in their formal stuff. And anyway, there were thousands and thousands of these priceless, precious manuscripts. In 1942, I think it was, when the Nazis were in occupation in that part, they torched the entire lot. They burned a villa just outside Naples as a spiteful act because some partisans had killed one German soldier on a routine patrol. I don't know what happened. And in revenge, they torched the entire archive of the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily. All these thousands of manuscripts went up. I regard that as an overreaction. I think that's up there in the Gaza League. Okay, you lose one soldier, one partisan should have been tried and sentenced. But to wipe out an entire culture's memory I think is not acceptable. It's kind of memory side. And that's what's been happening in Gaza when Israel has been blowing up bookshops and libraries and universities, and dozens of professors have been killed, apparently deliberately targeted, because intellectuals contain the memory of a culture. And so Israel's trying to wipe out their memory and their self-identification as Palestinians. Well, the Nazis did it, against the Kingdom of Naples, this is why I'm so much against war and for scholarship. I'm trying to prevent that happening. I mean, God forbid if ever conflicts escalate to a nuclear war, then the entire archives of Kiev, Moscow, Paris, we could make total chaos on this planet and destroy them all. And I'm saying stop, put the guns down, let's go to Rome and mediate, please. And I will spend some time in the library, in the Vatican Library there, which has tremendous archives. So yes, I've been working on Phoenician, fascinating language. I've been working on Quechua, which is the language of the Incans, the people of Peru and the Andes corridor, Ecuador, Bolivia, and parts of Colombia and so on. Fascinating language. And in parallel to this, I'm working on the next edition of my dictionary of global philosophical terminology. I'm the only philosopher that I know ever to create such a dictionary. When I studied at the University of Bristol, I was told, Wittgenstein says, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. Wittgenstein said, language is the key. And the Oxford School of Linguistic Philosophers are all saying the same thing. So this is my response to them. Yes, you're right. So we need a philosophical dictionary in all different languages, so I can learn to think like a Chinese, or like a Quechua, or like a Phoenician, or like a Latin speaking, or a Greek, or a Hebrew, or an ancient Egyptian. So it's got the languages of all these ancient sources. And as I'm going through the 99 Names of Peace, I'm using the dictionary, I'm increasing the languages. I've done ancient Egyptian, Turkish, Urdu, Zulu, African language, Maori, which is fascinating, and Tibetan. And then I've just been working today on Anglo-Saxon, which is one of the languages I started with and became really fascinated with because I'm an English speaker natively, and yet we're never taught Anglo-Saxon in school. We go to English classes, but we're never taught the origin of the language. Anglo-Saxon is such a fascinating language. It's a Germanic language, and I bought this book on my birthday, May the 8th, 1981, from the University of Oxford Press. Henry Sweet's Student Dictionary of Anglo-Saxon. It's absolutely superb. It's one of my go-to books. If I'm, there's something to learn on every page. And the word for peace in Anglo-Saxon is amazing. It's frith. F-R-I-T-H. Frith. It means peace or a truce. It means to be at peace, to make peace. The king's peace, all these terms. And the oath of the monarch of the Anglo-Saxons had to say when they're crowned, and Charles did say it, I believe, I think it's there in the modern coronation ceremony, is, I promised, well, no, he didn't, because he didn't read it in Anglo-Saxon, but it's, I promise to uphold the frith of the land, and that I will not allow violence to be done against even the poorest of my subjects. I will protect them. I will protect the frith. That's the oath that the king makes to protect the peace. And it was written that oath by St Dunstan, in fact, who was a great Anglo-Saxon saint and would have spoken Anglo-Saxon, as well as Latin, of course, because Latin became the learned language of the church, but at home they spoke Anglo-Saxon. So the words that come from frith are great. Peace ath is a peace oath. A frith beacon is a sign of peace. A frith break is a breach of peace. A frithburg is a peace city, which was a refuge, a place of refuge, a city of refuge. The frith candle is Anglo-Saxon word for the sun, which means the candle of peace, the great candle of peace, the sun. It's brilliant. A Frith Guild is a peace guild, an association to keep public order. A Frith land is a peaceful country. And Frithship means peace. So anyway, I've got all these words in my dictionary of 99 names of peace, and then I give the etymology of them, where they come from. And that word is related to the word freedom and free, and ultimately to love, Frida, joy, and the goddess of love, who was the wife of Odin, and Freya, who was one of the other great gods of the Norse and Anglo-Saxon people. So Fr is the root of all these, and it means freedom and love and joy. The Ode to Joy is Schiller's great poem, has the the Germanic word for it. So yeah, so I suppose what I'm praying and hoping is that the scholars of the world can convince the warlords and the nationalists and the racists and the people who are anti other people to sort of realise that we are united in our one ultimate genius. There isn't a need for war. We should surrender our egotism and our violent thoughts and so on to the eternal, to the spirit, to God as spirit. So that's what's kept me busy this week, and it's been fun. I mean, this is hard work sometimes, but it's, I think, hopefully history will judge that it's valuable. Okay, let's move on, and let's look at the periodic table. Any questions or comments about this so far? You can follow. I don't have to repeat it in French. I could do this in French, but it's a bit slower, Okay, choose your periodic table. I'm going to get a chart and do mine.
Yes, maybe one comment about what you've said about.
There's the big chart, by the way. That's the sort of blown up bit, which is for schools.
When you say you wrote to the church.
Yes. I know. I haven't actually written to the church yet. I've written to the UN Secretary General.
Okay, but
and the head of the Parliament. But I will write to the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at first view, it's surprising me, and then you explain, and I say, "Wow, wow, it's really interesting." But I was wondering if the church is still a bigger stuff, both in Russia and Ukraine. Of course, I've been interested in getting information about that topic, and the result is many people say Orthodox point of view is not so important on both sides. So I give that to you. I don't know. It's just a comment.
No, thank you. It's a good comment, and of course, many people